If you think of what kind of novel interactive systems for visual information visualization we can have, I mean, if you go especially for 3D environments, extended reality, virtual reality interfaces, we had to make ways for users to cope in those environments, like navigating into visualized 3D space, scaling things, because I mean, if you apply if you have like an immersive visualization which occupies a large space in virtual reality, that might be hard to explore if we don't have efficient means, and also different size of visualizations, they might require quite different views than we have used, for example, the Zoom interfaces, which I explained previously. And we need to make selections. We need to have views. All of the same principles apply for immersive visualization as well. But the techniques that we need to do in the 3D space, they are quite different. And actually, we don't really know them yet. Also manipulating objects, placing them, planning different types of routes to the views. And those need to be done. But if successful, those will be quite different. We are, instead of looking at visualization, we are part of the visualization in the 3D world. And that's the beauty of it. Of course, we need to generate, extract, and collect it in the same way. And we have to be really like a natural means, because if we put people in the virtual world and it's immersive, they expect that they can also interact in that space by natural means. But what is natural? Like I said, if we assume that people are walking in the virtual world like they are working in real life, that might become easily inefficient methods. And there's been a lot of techniques developed, for example, like a navigation, different teleportation means. There are countless amount of those, but there's one common characteristics for most of those. They easily create cyber sickness and confuse people. So definitely we need more things towards that. If you need to for what kind of equipment there's some available, basically we can have a full immersive displays, head-mounted displays, for example, Quest 3s that Kimmo will bring to the Varala next week. I think there will be 4 devices or something like that, Kimmo. So those can be used by those people who work in that technologies. And then, of course, there's a see-through displays. We all know that the Google's vision on goggles died already many years ago, but they are coming when the time is right. It's actually a really good question. And that means that instead of being in a virtual immersive world, we are actually embedding information visualization into our environment. And that can be fascinating. That can be really fascinating. That is happening, for example, in cars. We have a head-up displays and things like that. But the problem here easily becomes that, our world is already quite complex. If we add too much information on top of that, it will be even more chaotic, and especially it increases our cognitive load, which is not so good. So there must be a balance how much we will add more information. Of course, there's another technique called diminished reality. Instead of adding something for the real world, overloading people with digital information, we can take some elements from the real world and make them go away, so we can focus on what is meaningful. This might sound that these are the so-called pink glasses. We also want to see what we like to see, but let's hope that that's not the future, but there are good use cases on that. Also, at the moment, we have a basic challenge is that even some of the head-mounted displays are pretty good. The interaction with them is done mostly by some kind of like a handheld controls, which are themselves pretty good, but that's not very natural. And that also means that if you use those handheld controllers, our hands are occupied by having those, and we can't use our hands for the real world tasks. There is now a big trend towards using our hands without any devices, because the hand tracking technologies have been improving from year to year. And yes, they became quite good, but personally, at this point, I think that they are not so good that I would use them, but instead I still use the handheld devices because they are more accurate, to be honest. But hand tracking techniques are becoming more and more viable. And also we are requiring, we are also not have all our senses. For example, we need handheld devices can provide haptic feedback, which is lost when we use just hand tracking. But that's the kind of compromises we are going to have. My own personal view is that these technologies became like every day when we finally can get rid of cables. So I don't believe any solution that have a cable and you need a PC to run it. Basically, I mean, we can do demos for them, but having something meaningful, it needs to be just the classes that we put on. No wires, no computer running nearby. And second thing is that we can interact with them by pointing, hand gestures, speaking. All that means that we don't need to carry out external or wearable devices to interact in the virtual worlds. We are not yet there, but we are becoming closer and closer. And yeah, also the natural interaction requires quite precise positioning, orientation techniques, so we can not have the mismatch between the physical and virtual reality. Even small mismatch easily leads to sharper sickness, and even if not sharper sickness, it leads to non-believable. We don't get the immersion. The immersion is crucial here, and that's the challenge. On the other hand, we can't expect that we put external equipment for all the spaces we are, and we are far away from the fact that our walls in built environments and outdoor environments will have all the tracking technology that is needed for precise interaction. So a lot of these challenges, lack of spatial input, lack of constraints, standards, tools, precision, fatigue. When I've been teaching in virtual reality, it is at the moment more challenging, and I'm much tired than having any kind of other lecture. But on the other hand, I hope that natural voice user interfaces are becoming more and more commonly used in extended reality. Gestures are not used as much as they are. Basically, the current standard is that we have a point interfaces and then overlaid graphical user interfaces. That's not even. I think the most talked, like Apple Vision Pro device. It has this traditional, I'll put some icons on front of you and you have to use your finger to point and select those. Clumsy, I don't want that. But we don't have much better choices, and especially speech recognition is really not used properly to that point. Also, the field of view needs to be wider than it is currently. When we have something close to our natural vision, then we can have a really good case and full body input. Reality, of course, is that we have very limited input possibilities. And range of tracking is quite limited. And there's a quite reduced field of view. It has become better and better, but I think this two-dimensional graphical user interface, which I just explained, is still in the most advanced head-mounted displays. I think that's our worst enemy at the moment. Well, that was about the virtual part. We just wanted to give some thoughts, and since we have one group focusing on this, let's see how they can take these into advance. Just one note for the those people who like to take some to make some like augmented reality based visualizations. Please think carefully. What is the benefit of having these visualizations in the real space? On top of the real space, augmenting that instead of virtual reality, because most of the augmented reality solutions I have seen, they are actually, they would have be better virtual reality solutions. They are not really utilizing the surrounding real environment, I mean, in meaningful ways. But yeah, let's have a short discussion on decision making before going for the accessibility part. So quite often these techniques are used to guide decision making. I've been discussing a lot and emphasizing that information visualization is a process. It's not about making a diagram or anything like that. So those are only small parts of the whole thing, which is about trying to figure out what there is in the data, exploring that, making other visualizations, and finally something that helps us to make decisions. So we need to get related information. We had to make a method representation of the problem and solutions, and somehow identify what could be the optimal, so-called optimal solution. And while we are doing this, I mean, this is something what we do in everyday life without paying any attention to that. But what is the role of the information visualization is that we have to find the proper representations, visual representations that might enhance that decision making. When we see, okay, that it means. Now, of course, I understand that I should choose this selection instead of that because the data shows me. That's also, of course, the way how especially journalists have used this for decades for lying to people, affecting their decision. The same with politicians. So there are a lot of misuse. And if you do that properly, we are providing cognitive tools. I mean, we can lower the burden that we are put on people, and actually, information visualization best part is that when we see something, it's always there. We can look at it continuously, and it helps us to process the information. Audio doesn't have this feature, which is one meaning why providing same kind of information with audio is a little bit more challenging, because audio is a temporal medium, as we know. And quite often this is about the collaborative visualization. So like I have emphasized quite often when we work with data visualization, we need to provide for the different stakeholders the kind of information, the kind of views that can help them to make decisions together. And of course, there are a lot of domains where this is needed. And then we also need to provide tools for users to share and discuss that data. Often this is a process which is where not everybody is in the same in front of the same visualization, but they might visit that at different times. But we need to keep up the social interaction that is taking place so that they can make eventually decisions. Yeah, that was shortly about decision making. I mean, there are a lot of aspects related to that, and usually at this point we have one real-world use case example. But because of the time constraints, I'm skipping that at the moment. But please think of, I mean, even if you are, I mean, taking into account our context here, mostly you are probably doing this so that you are embedding visualizations as a part of some kind of media production, or you are making kind of a companion app for those media productions. But even then, I bet most of you want to influence other people. You want to give them food for thoughts, and so that they can make decision. If you think of this context of the GEM project, we are interested about green education, communicating sustainability related information for people. And by giving them tools themselves to see and find out what are, for example, viable choices to make our world more sustainable, that could really have influence. And I emphasize that give them the tools to find that out, not just make a nice visualization and put that to the movie or anything, because then you are feeding opinions to them, but you are not letting them to make the choice. So that's why I think that the interactive visualization can be a big part of the putting power to the people. All right, let's go for the accessibility. This is my favorite part because information visualization is a kind of a field where a lot of accessibility violations are being made because people want to make nice looking visualization. Some tend to be very artistic and very fancy looking, but at the same time, they might be really not accessible at all for everybody. So what is accessibility? There are a lot of terms which basically, terms, approaches, guidelines, most well-known are, for example, barrier-free design, universal usability, universal design, universal access, design for all, accessibility itself, accessible design, inclusive design. This is not a definitive list of the terms that you have encountered. There are many of those. And people use these pretty loosely, depending on where they are coming from. But more or less, they are aiming for the same thoughts. Let's take a deeper look of what is actually accessibility. So basically, it's equal access and equal opportunity for the people with disabilities. We can see some of the groups here. We can divide disabilities by different categories like physical, sensory, linguistic, or cognitive. And we can some of those are permanent, some are temporary, and some are situational. For example, an example from here related sensory disability is that concern deaf people, and that's permanent usually. There are, of course, technology is advancing, and sometimes people who are completely deaf, they can get back of their hearing. Same goes with blind as well. Then you can have an ear infection. I have a narrow ear canals, and I quite often get my ear stuck, and it's horrible to have ear stuck in the middle of the busy, like a teaching period, for example. So then the work becomes suddenly really hard to deal with. And the situational example is that we have a bartender. There's a lot of noise. You have to try to figure out what the people are ordering. They might not be so like a super, like their speech can be like distorted and just not loud enough. These are the things that happen. There's also different kind of conditions, social exclusion. We can deal with elderly people in rural areas. Actually, that's where our work has been focusing quite heavily, and many times the same solutions that help with people with different disabilities, also people who have some socio-technical challenges. For example, there are still quite a lot of people, illiterate or functionally illiterate people in this world, which means that even they can read, they don't have enough literacy skills that they can understand, for example, official documentation. And we all know how horrible those for all of us. If you take any of our universities' administrative document and try to read it, I mean, it requires a lot of cognitive work, at least for me. And put that for the people who don't have, for example, enough vocabulary to really understand that. It means that they have really hard times of dealing with the material. So illiteracy and low literacy is something that is there. We just don't see that in most of the Western countries, because I think in all of the countries that we are coming, the literary rate is really high. And there are a lot of language barriers, and this is not going away. I mean, everybody thinks that, okay, we have a common language called English, but that's really not so. So there are a lot of cases, there are a lot of people who need these techniques. So we are getting soon to the how this relates to information visualization, which is of course our viewpoint, but I just wanted to give this background to you. So accessibility is not usability. In the field of human-computer interaction, where I'm coming, first we wanted that digital artifacts became usable. Then we focused on user experience, and now we want them to be accessible as well. And something that is usable might be not accessible, and something that is accessible might not actually be so usable or provide so user experience. But let's say that this is, like I said, we had to I mean, in order to have build some accessibility, you had to make that things are usable. So we think that usability is the first thing to take care of, and then we can focus on making those really accessible and provide a good experience for different users. And this is also the thing that what kind of solution provides usable and accessible digital solution for somebody with a good user experience. Another people's user experience might not be so good, and especially if we are replacing something with other, like we often need to do. For example, I use this example of that what is the power of visualization is that we can continuously see the visualization in front of that. It's not disappearing, we can export that. But if we now have a people with low vision or blind, if you give that same information with audio, then we are dealing with temporal media, and people need to, I mean, they can replay the same audio again and again, but that's not efficient. So that's why quite often in accessibility work, the most obvious choice that we just replace one visualization, one like a modality, one media format with another. It's not the way to do it. The right way, quite often, or the goal is to find completely another way to approach the solution to make it accessible for others. And I like to also say that when we are talking about accessibility here, we are focusing on digital accessibility. There's physical accessibility, which quite often comes to people's mind, and what we are both are needed, but here we are focusing on the digital accessibility. So then something about the assistive technologies. Basically, there is a lot of technologies which provide assistance for people so that they can utilize the same solutions, and others by the help of these assistive technologies. And basically, we can take one viewpoint of that assistive technology takes the functional needs of people with disability as starting point for specific design. That's like quite often how it's defined. But from a general point of view would be that assistive technology includes both devices and services into use. For example, a service that supports assistive technology adaptation, meaning assessment, equation, device use. So it's more about the complete process. And that there's a definition from World Health Organization that assistive technology is any device or system that enables a person to perform a task that would otherwise be too difficult to execute and which facilitate a task being performed. Here are some examples. Screen readers are, of course, one of the key elements, and they are used by a lot of people with low vision. And since we are talking about information visualization, I really like you to think of how the visualization that you are making, how they sound if you're making utilize screen readers. And that's where quite many challenges can be met. Hearing aids are, of course, help people with hearing things, and then there are other devices like speech to text and others that have helped people. That are examples that have become a mainstream. Then we are getting for adaptive strategies. This is how people with disabilities used to interact with the digital environment. And that basically means that they adapt their strategies for using the technology by customizing, for example, internet browser settings, resizing windows, fonts. And the key thing is that we can decide what is good for all. That's the kind of like challenge of all those universal design simplifications, because every person has different strategies. They had to make it themselves. And quite often, the first thing that people notice when we are talking about assistive technologies and accessibility, that there's no actual groups of users. Yeah, individuals with individual needs. And we had to think when we make some digital solution, we had to think in all the time how this can be parameterized, what kind of settings we can provide for people that the people can tailor this. We are not in the control of the final output. If we do that, we are emphasizing our own view, our own maybe beliefs, but those can be totally inaccessible for many people. And some people might use specialist software and hardware. Like I said, this assistive technology that I was presenting. Others may adjust platforms and settings to accommodate their needs. There are a lot of things, and basically that we create usability through adaptability and personalization. And quite often, for example, when somebody has an accident or illness, and one becomes in need of having assistive technologies and cope with adaptive strategies, there are people who help them on individual basis to do that. And to motivate why we need to do this, I didn't have them facts and figures, but you can easily find, for example, on accessibility courses, how large amount of people is needing this effect. But also that when we make something accessible and for special needs, it easily became the mainstream technology. Examples, the very early examples include the keyboard, voice recognition, pinch zooming that has been first made for assistive technologies. And by removing these barriers to access physical or digital solutions, actually everybody get benefits. It also supports social inclusion, and finally, it's a good for business. And now, I mean, like I said, in the old days, computer scientists like me, we were not thinking too much about the usability. Then, slowly and painfully, usability became something that was like a feature that you cannot anymore have without. It became advantage if you had a good usability. Then people demanded that now we have usable digital solutions. They must provide us a good user experience, and that became benefit. And now, finally, we are in the era that we need the accessibility to come into the play, and in the future, our solutions must be accessible as well, and that becomes like a, in that way, like a de facto done. Okay, a little bit long introduction. Maybe I have a message in this. Yes, I have. But let's see what it means from visualization viewpoint. Yes, this is all about visualization, and of course, the fact is that we live in a visual world. Most of our information is perceived visually, and especially when we're talking about data visualization techniques. So basically, here, when we do this transformation from data to different models and views, we need to find new ways for us to convey this information and make sure that it is acceptable for all. And what if you remember one thing from this lecture, I think that could be that there are a lot of tools. I mean, this is not just theoretical, but there are really good tools for checking out how accessible the solutions you made are. You can get a number of, for example, for web accessibility check, you can get extensions for the basically all browsers, and you can easily, when you install those, you can check out then with one click if there are clear accessibility challenges in the things that you have been doing. This doesn't apply just for information visualization for all web-based services. Let's then have a very practical viewpoint. What are the easy means to make information visualization accessible? And they are not anything surprising: colors, contrasts, and alternative text. If you think of colors, worldwide, there are roughly 300 million people with color blindness. One of my long-term, now sadly passed away colleague reminded me for 3 decades about this issue, because he was colorblind. He had a color blindness. And I learned really from everyday life that don't use certain combinations of colors. And especially, please do not use only colors to deliver information. Typical examples that people are making almost every day, that they use red and green in the illustrations, in the visual charts. The only way to make a distinction, to deliver information. For people with red and green blindness, they look the same. Your message is not delivered. So please think of this. You can use colors, and of course we all understand the aesthetics of visualizations as well, but simply you can use them. Just keep in mind that not everybody sees them in the same way, and please don't use them as the only mean. They can be like the second way of providing information, but please have something else as well. Otherwise, we all know that how colors are perceived depends on quite many issues. There are different color spaces. Our displays have a different capabilities of representing those color spaces. There's no any ultimate display which can show all colors, etc. So that's a quite challenging. Anyway, then we have a contrast, and this is again really important for people who have vision-related issues, and quite often, for example, people want to have a kind of like artistically nice set of pastel color themes and things like that. They can easily become that people who have vision challenges, they don't see the differences. And also, contrast help us, everybody. I need nowadays much more light than I used to be when I was younger. I need stronger contrast. When we are getting older, it simply helps us to see. And luckily, there are really a lot of, all the accessibility check tools that I mentioned some minutes ago, they calculate for you automatically these things if you have a too low contrast like a visualizations in your web pages. And then the third one, which is often forgot, that's the alternative texts or alt texts. So they basically describe the content of the non-text content, and they are mainly used by screen readers, they are nowadays, luckily, became more and more like a common, even in social media. Basically, every image, table, infograph, and visualization should have an alternative text. And that's, people don't do those. I have to admit that I forget that as well, from time to time, because they take time. Why they take time? You have to think by different means how to express the same information that you are expressing visually. That's surprisingly difficult. And but still, you shouldn't let that not to be done. Luckily, again, I don't like to say that AI is replacing us. It's making those automatically. We shouldn't butter. They are good tools, but in the end, you should check those, and that would actually is a really good help nowadays. Many of the visualization tools already have are utilizing AI, and as we know, we have made a huge advantage in this field. So this is becoming more better by day by day. So there are further guidelines, things that you should do and you should not do, like avoid complex tools, labeling data points directly. Hover displays, they can be very fancy looking, people like them, but they might be really challenging from accessibility viewpoint. Language selections, all kind of like things that help people to cope with these techniques can be utilized easily. I have some additional slides, but I think we'll skip those mostly. I like to just mention that if you think of more accessible visualizations, and especially we started this discussion today by introducing what novel techniques like extended reality can bring in. They can bring in a lot, but they can also be super challenging from accessibility viewpoint. If you think of current virtual reality, augmented reality solutions, let's say they assume mostly helping users without any disabilities, and they can be totally inaccessible for many. And now, if we believe these visions, that's why we're not believing that we are going to have these many services, for example, can be in the future in virtual reality. We can have this thing called metaverse, and you can have an appointment with your doctor on there. You can learn. You can have your education. You can meet your friends, play games. How accessible they are. Games are, by the way, other example. But luckily, there's been a lot of improvement lately. But there are like some things are like adding visual indicators, utilizing spatial audio, and providing motion alternatives. Because surprisingly many so-called natural interaction techniques, they actually require that you have your full body is fully working. But that's reasoning out a lot of people. There can be different kinds of subtitles and textual indicators. You can label data points. Those are like they're a little bit like alternative texts in different formats, but now for virtual three-dimensional data. You can have audio for user interactions, subtitles, all of these kind of things. And again, it's a little bit the same as with the, for example, with the color. There are a lot of people also who don't have the ability to perceive spatial audio. For example, I have learned when my son has been working. I have known for her life that he doesn't have a spatial audio. I forget that quite often in everyday context. I cannot say if, for example, when he was younger and we were in the forest, and if we get a little bit lost, I said it was meaningful to shout, "Hey, I'm here! Come here!" Or that it doesn't. He couldn't locate that the sound was coming properly. So if you use spatialized audio, that can be beneficial, and there are a lot of techniques developed already 30 years ago how to utilize spatialized audio, but that can be useful, but please keep in mind that also not everybody is able to perceive that. And then a really important issue is that, like I said, if you are making those fancy immersive visualizations where instead of watching one, we are put inside the visualization and we are exploring that by moving, the key item is the movement. It's challenging already for all of us because some of the techniques have drawbacks, but these can be really challenging for if you think of people with who are using wheelchair and for they have problems with their hands. I mean, you have to provide assisting like a suitable emotional alternatives for them. With customization, like we said, the key issue for many of the people with challenges, disabilities, have the use of adaptive techniques, which are always individual. So instead of, please don't try to find out the proper way to do it, because there's no proper way to do it. Instead, give choice for people to customize how they see and what they see, how they move, etc. Yeah, there are a lot of references for this, but I think that was enough from the informative part. And if we go back to this view of, I'm